many positions open, you can come and talk to me or Luke in the back right there. If you guys have any questions about like our tech stack or what we do or anything, but yeah, hope you guys enjoy everything. So thank you.
All right, so my name is Chris Houseknecht. I am with Ansible, which is now, as you know, part of Red Hat, and I'm a principal engineer, and I'm also part of the community team, which is sort of a weird combination. So I spend a lot of my time still doing engineering things. I work on Ansible Container, and we're starting to ramp back up a team to do some things with the Ansible Galaxy website. So I'm the team lead for that, and as part of the community team, I get to do fun things like come out and talk to you guys at meetups and talk at conferences and do some blog posts and things like that. So that's what I do. You can find me on GitHub and Twitter and anywhere on social media with my first initial last name, and my email there is there as well. So a couple, gosh, it's probably been a month and a half now. It was back at our last Ansible Fest. We announced this thing called AWX, and that's basically open source Tower. So how many here are using Ansible, writing playbooks and that sort of thing on a regular basis? So that's just about everybody. How many folks are using Tower? You know what Tower is? Awesome. So for those of you who can't see, no one put their hands up, so that's a good thing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what AWX is, and then we'll actually install it and do a little demo. We'll set it up and run some jobs, and so you can see firsthand what Tower or AWX is all about. So that is the open source project under the Ansible namespace on GitHub. So what exactly is AWX? In my mind, I think that AWX is to Tower. So Tower is our commercial product that sits on top of Ansible, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. But AWX is to Tower as Fedora is to RHEL. Right, so Fedora is the open source project for RHEL. If you're familiar with enterprise Linux, all of the sort of new things, all the innovation, all of the change happens in the Fedora open source project. Right, so Fedora is a fast-moving project. It releases a lot faster. It may not always be, if you're working in the beta alpha releases, it's not always perfectly stable. And then enterprise Linux is always, the rock solid product that's ready to go to market. And so that's sort of the relationship between AWX and Tower. Tower is the commercial product. It's going to release slower. It's going to be more customer focused, where AWX is the open source project. It's going to move fast. And you can see that already. When we announced the open sourcing of the AWX project, it was at version like 1.0, and Tower is at, I forget now, like I'm going to get it wrong, 3.2 or 3.3 or something. And so right off the bat, they decided we're not going to align the versions. We're going to start AWX at version 1, and we're going to be on a 2 or 3 week release schedule. So it's going to move quickly. You're going to see features pop up in AWX first. If you're working out of the development branch, it's called Devil, you might experience some breakage. That branch might not always be perfect, but that's where you're going to see, what the future looks like for Tower. All right, so the delivery mechanism for AWX is actually in Docker containers. And if you look at the installation guide, so I just have the open source, the GitHub repo up. And if you look at the install guide, There's a pretty substantial document that tells you how you can install this thing on OpenShift or how you can install it on Docker, and it gives you some background on some of the options you can set and things that you can do. So what I'm going to do is actually install it out on an AWS instance just using Docker. We've tested and done OpenShift installs. To my knowledge, just using Minishift. So if any of you are familiar with the Kubernetes world and OpenShift, Minishift is just like a virtual box machine. I think it's actually on Mac it uses Xhive, but it's just a virtual machine with the OpenShift containers running inside of it, and you can kind of use it for development and launch things on it, and it's pretty convenient. Normally I would do that, but since we're got video going and everything, I didn't want to turn my laptop into a hairdryer and melt it down with all the virtualization going on top of it. So I decided what we would do is deploy it out on AWS. But I just wanted to point out, if you look at the installation guide, there are some options.
Hey, Chris, AWX, does that stand for something?
Everybody asks that, and there's no definitive answer. When we first started developing Tower, and I was one of the original engineers hired to work on Tower. I think I was really employee 3 or 4. And the company was called Ansible Works. And I think AWX was sort of shortening for that. So we went through these, I forget the exact order. At one time, before it was called Tower, it was Ansible Commander. And then the marketing folks decided, that sounds a little kind of military-like. We're not really excited about that. And it actually was called AWX for a while. And then I think people were like, what does that mean? And so at some point it became Tower. And then when we went to open source it, we looked at, what do we have laying around that we have trademarks for and all that stuff, and we still had AWX things. So that's how AWX happened. And we already had some branding around. So you guys probably know Michael DeHaan, the creator, founder of Ansible. He had printed up these T-shirts that had, this was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, the AWX logo with the wings on it. And so we still had, I think, that artwork laying around, and so that's how we'll use what we have.
Sorry to distract you, get back to technicals.
That's okay. It's, stuff like that's fun. It's fun to remember some of that history. So a couple of things I wanted to point out about the installation before I just run it. Let me see if I can drop out to the command line. And let's go to, let me get to a tab that will work. So I want to set up my Python virtual environment, and we'll go to my local copy of the AWX project. And if you go into the installer directory, so make that a little bit bigger. Okay. So if we look in the installer directory, we're going to see a few things. Things that we care about. We really care about the inventory file, so we'll take a look at that. And we care about install.yaml. That's the playbook we're going to run to deploy this. Since we're Ansible, we try to eat our own dog food as much as we can, so we're going to deploy with actual playbooks and roles. And how you control the installation is really through the inventory file. Hopefully you can see that. So by default, you'll notice up at the top, that very top line up there, it says localhost, and I have that commented out. So by default, the intention is we're going to install this on localhost, and you'll notice a couple lines down, there's this all bars for the all groups. So these bars apply to all the hosts, and there's all kinds of things that we can set in there. And what I've done is I've commented out localhost, and I said I want you to run this, I want to deploy this actually out on a remote host, and that is the public IP address of the host I want, excuse me, of the host I want to use, and actually, it's actually not the host I want to use. I actually want to use this one. So I have two hosts actually set up, and in a minute you will see why I did that. All right, so that's the host where we want to run it, and I've got the variable Ansible user set to CentOS, because that's how the playbook is going to log in and run. So we're going to use the images that are available out on Docker Hub. There's actually a role in here called image build. If you want to kind of pull apart the Tower image build, the AWX image build process, and customize it, you actually can. All the steps to build that image are in the image build role. And I'll point out a couple interesting things that you might want to know. It will come with, when it comes up, it'll have a super user already created. It's admin password. You can change that here if you want. AWX secret, we don't really care about that. That's just the secret it uses for decrypting and encrypting and decrypting things. OpenShift settings, we're not going to worry about. The Postgres settings, I think, are interesting. So if you start using AWX for real and you want to upgrade, you're going to want to not have your database live inside of a container. You're going to want the database to live outside. So AWX Tower relies on Postgres for its SQL database. And so what we're going to end up with once I run this is an actual Postgres database running in a container, but we can tell it, hey, put the data files outside to the file system. So by default, they get sent to /temp/pg docker. Also, probably don't want our data files in temp space. So, and you can actually set up, there's some variables down here. You can actually go set up your own Postgres database. It can be in the cloud, it can be wherever, and you can set the host name, username, password, and all that stuff right here. And the install process will actually pick that up and use it. So you don't have to run Postgres in a container if you don't want to. So if you're going to use AWX for real, I'd recommend setting up your own external Postgres database, making sure it's backed up and all of that stuff. So this is your opportunity to do that. The AWX logos, so some of you might know, I'll show you real quick because I think it's kind of fun. If we go out to GitHub, there's a repo called AWX Logos. And that's where you'll find the official branding. And if we drill in here, we see, what's this guy? All right, there it is. So that's the official branding. AWX logo, if you use this logo, you must agree to Red Hat's terms. If you say, screw that, I don't want to agree to your terms, that's perfectly fine. If we go back to the AWX repo, and I probably won't actually be able to find it. I think I can find it. Okay, I'm not going to look for it. You'll see this, the angry spud. So we can look at it later. But it's actually kind of funny. There's like a lot of different funny names for it. Raging spud, raging tater. So if you don't use the official branding, then you get the angry tater. All right, so back to my inventory overview. What else is in here? And proxy settings. So if you need to use a proxy when you're pulling images and all that fun stuff, if you're doing the custom build and you're downloading packages and things, you can set the proxy settings here, and the install process will use them. All right, so without any further ado, I'm going to kick this off, maybe, yeah. And all we need to do is run Ansible Playbook, pass in that inventory file, and run the install script. If you deploy to OpenShift then there's a few extra command line parameters you need to do. And if you read through the install guide, it'll explain some extra variables that you can pass in. But for our purposes, it's fairly simple. And hopefully this will work. Cool. This thing's going to go. So we'll let that run for a minute. And while I have it in my clipboard, let's open up a tab. All right, so there's nothing there yet. In a few moments there will be, and we'll see how it looks when it first comes up. So while that's running, you get to hear me go drone on a bit. Where are my slides? Slides.
Do you have to make changes to the playbook to make it run the AWS? Can you run the playbooks as if?
I'm just using it as is. The only thing I'm changing is the inventory. So I'm just going through the inventory file based on what you'll find in the install doc. It tells you how to set those things. And you really should not need to tinker with the playbook. If you want to build custom images, and I said I was going to touch on that real quick, you will notice if I go under the AWX, if I go under the installer directory, there is an image build. And so you may find that you want to customize, if you want to build your own images, and one of the things you might want to change is the settings file. So if you look inside files, there's a settings.py. So AWX or Tower is a Django project. Anyone here familiar with Django, use Django? All right, so some people have. So Django is a web framework. It's built in Python. If you're in the Python world, Django is fairly popular. And it has this settings file that kind of controls everything. So if you want to set up your AWX, say, to connect to LDAP, you would want to do things in the settings file. If you want to do special things with, this may not be true, but I think it is, if you want to use like fact caching, I think you can do some things in the setting file to do that. So I think anytime you get into, I want to build my own custom AWX thing, you're probably going to tinker with the image build rule. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, but I was actually thinking more about the playbook that you would run inside AWX as you run, like you said about the inventory files,
we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Hold that question. All right, so it hasn't come up yet. That's okay. We'll give it a few more minutes. I wanted to go back to my slides real quick. All right, so so I've changed my screen, but that's not changing.
Oh, for sure. Is it like that? It's probably what you share.
Did it stop sharing? Maybe. Hold on.
You just have to reshare. Sometimes it only shares one screen.
I think it lost the connection. Yeah, it's not connecting to the meeting.
Yeah, let's just do that.
Do you have an adapter? I don't have any. All right, intermission. Go grab some pizza. Beer. Do you have any beer?
We do have beer if you want.
I don't want. They might want. They're like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. These people.
It's only 10 and more different movies.
There's one. Yeah, that's one. do that. All right.
I just want to like kill some.
Yeah. All right.
Just close this. Close this guy. Because we don't want
And we're back. Woo. Cool. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
All right. So my AWX instance is up and running, and it's doing database upgrades. So it's building the database, which takes, I don't know, 5-10 minutes. So that's why I created 2 instances, because I don't really want to wait around for that. But one thing I do want to show you. So I just want to connect, maybe. No. I want to connect to that box. Let's try this guy. That's weird. Well, no big deal. What I wanted to do is show you the actual, like, what's running on the AWS host. I assume this seems to be working. So it's odd, it can connect to a web browser.
group on instance.
No. It's okay. All right. I have a slide. We'll talk about my slide for just 1 second. We're going to skip ahead maybe. All right. So this is what I wanted to show you. All right. If you look, if we could get into that machine, we would see actually 4 containers running. So what's running is an AWX web container, which has UWSG and Nginx in it. UWSG is just a process for serving up the Django web app. And then Nginx, our favorite web server. And then over here we have AWX Task, which is running this thing called Celery. So in the Django world, Celery is the thing most people use to do background task execution. And there's a ton of stuff going on in the background behind AWX. So the point of AWX is to run a playbook. We run lots of playbooks, and we're going to see how to do that. So we're kicking off, we're sending out requests to start a playbook, gather the output, kill a playbook, schedule a playbook. So all that stuff in the background is being handled by Celery. It actually goes through RabbitMQ to do all the queuing and organizing tasks and making sure they actually get handled. We use memcached for a cache. And all of it talks to the Postgres database. So we actually would see 5 containers out there. And if we launched this on OpenShift, the reason why these 4 guys are in this blue box, if you're familiar with Kubernetes or OpenShift, there's this thing called a pod. And all 4 of those containers would actually be in a single pod. And the intention is, and I don't think the installer is able to do it yet, but the intention is to be able to scale that pod. And the reason why we're putting these all in a pod is, one, they can all just communicate with one another through localhost. And in order to do, sort of create a cluster, because we're sending all these tasks into RabbitMQ. We need, if we have multiple instances of RabbitMQ, it has this cool clustering feature. So it kind of handles that stuff for us automatically. We don't have to do a lot of work to organize the communication between the pods and make sure that task execution actually happens and tasks don't get lost. So that's why it's organized that way. So hopefully that gives you some idea of what's going on when you install AWX. All right, so back to my slides for 1 second, and then we're going to hop into AWX and see it for real. So the point of Tower is that it sits on top of Ansible. So everybody here raised their hands earlier and said, yes, I know what an Ansible Playbook is. That's this layer down here, right? We all know Ansible as this thing that we can run through SSH. We don't have to install agents everywhere. It's pretty simple to use. All I need to know is some YAML, and I'm off to the races. It comes with, like, I don't know how many modules now. It's well over 1,000 modules and growing all the time. We've added a ton of stuff in the networking space, but all of these modules are kind of what give Ansible its power and the plugins, right? And that power comes from in 2 ways. One, right out of the box, Ansible can talk to a ton of APIs, a ton of equipment, infrastructure types of things. But it's also powerful because it gives new folks to the project an easy place to start contributing. Right? I can add a new module to Ansible, and like it's pretty well documented, lots of examples. And I can extend Ansible that way really easy as a new developer, as someone new to the community. Same with plugins and other pieces of Ansible that are modular. So Tower sits on top of that. What does Tower bring? And you see those 3 words up there: control, knowledge, delegation. Control, because we can all of a sudden take those playbooks that we're used to running on the command line, and maybe we stick them in cron. Probably not. We probably just like run them from our laptop or whatever, and no one really is auditing that. We just kind of use Ansible to get stuff done when we need it. Well, all of a sudden I can schedule that stuff. I can set up and run it in this thing called a job, and I can create a job template. So now, as I'm running things through AWX, through these things called jobs that we'll take a look at, I start to build up some knowledge because all that logging, there's auditing. And now, like, other people can come along, my manager can see, oh yeah, we're running all this stuff and we're doing whatever with our infrastructure, and there's some visibility. Delegation, because as a system admin, who's like, I'm normally writing these playbooks and roles, and I know what all this stuff is, I know where the infrastructure lives and the credentials and all that stuff, but there's no real easy way for me to give maybe my development team access to that stuff and let them run the pieces that they need in a way that won't be damaging, or that they won't accidentally take down half of our infrastructure if they do it wrong. Now all of a sudden with AWX, I can delegate that and start to empower other people around me, and maybe get rid of, or not have to do so much of the mundane things that I get stuck doing every day. This slide I think is interesting because at the top it shows admin, so this is kind of what I was talking about, right? Admins are focused on playbooks and roles. We're writing the YAML, we know what all these modules and plugins and things do. We know where the infrastructure is, we know what the credentials are, we have access to all that stuff. And then there's these users down here, developers or whoever, folks that are concerned about the business and the applications. And they're usually coming to us and saying, hey, I need to provision some things out on AWS, can you help me with that? Or they got to fill out a piece of paper or whatever the process is. Well, now all of a sudden with AWX, I can start to delegate some of this stuff, and all of a sudden, like, we start communicating in terms of like playbooks and roles and code. It becomes a different dynamic. So I think to me, that's the important part of that slide. All right, I think it's time for the demo. So what is the demo? No, don't join us yet. So what I want to do is actually log into an AWX instance, and we're going to kind of go from the beginning and set it all up and run some things. So you can kind of get a better feel of like what is this tower thing all about. So I believe I did it right. So this guy is still upgrading. This guy should be done. All right, cool. So like I said earlier, when you first get the login screen, the username is admin, password is password. If I come out to your business one day to help do some consulting work, I'm going to try to log in with admin and password, and if I can, I'm going to get you fired. So please change your admin password. All right. So the whole point of this is to bring together all the pieces that we usually use to run a playbook. So what are some of those pieces? And I've listed them off already if you're paying attention. Anyone, show of hands or just shout it out. What are the things you need in order to run a playbook?
Inventory file.
Inventory file, that's right. So we need some infrastructure to run against, right? And how are we going to get to it? What else do we need?
SSH key.
SSH keys. So we need some credentials, absolutely. And we need the actual playbook. I think that's it. Those are kind of the three big things that a playbook brings together. So let's start off with the thing I didn't mention, some users, because what we don't really want to sit here and run all this stuff ourselves as the admin. We want to start to be able to delegate things. So we're going to create a couple users, and you get to watch me do the agonizing typing thing. But I think this may be painful to watch, but that's okay. By the end, you'll have a feel for how all this stuff works.
I take it you have LDAP authentication built in, right?
Yeah, so if you go take a look at docs.ansible.com, there's a whole big thing on the right-hand side about Tower. Under the admin guide, you'll find everything you want to know about LDAP and how to configure that. I don't know if you can just use the containers off of Docker Hub and automatically connect it, or if you need to modify, I think you need to modify that settings file, so you may have to build your own image, but you can make it work. Because yeah, you don't want to, like if you have lots of users, you don't want to have to do this. All right, yeah, successfully created a user.
So
And,
are these users actually stored in a database, or are they stored
So
on?
everything I'm doing is going to get stored in Postgres. Yep. The passwords get encrypted and de-encrypted with that using that secret key. It's the same level of encryption we use for Vault. That's as much as I know about our encryption. It all happens on the back end. We'll talk a little bit later on about the API that this comes with. And the important thing to know is once you put in a password, it will never get exposed to a user or anywhere in a log. It will get exposed on the back end when we run the playbook, because we've got to decrypt it and hand it off. So we've got, they're using bubble wrap, I think it's called, to kind of create an execution environment where that happens. So it would be almost impossible for that to be breached. All right, so what you'll notice is going on here is on the top half of the screen, you see all the detail, right? This is the user I just created, so first name, last name, passwords, all that stuff. Down on the bottom is the list of users that I have. And you'll see that sort of UI pattern or metaphor, if you will, all throughout Tower or AWX. So the detail is usually at the top, list of stuff at the bottom. There's usually an add button. So if I want to create a new object, in this case users, I can click that add button and it'll be up here doing things. So there's always sort of that split screen effect. And over on the left-hand side, you'll see I have this menu going on, all of my tools that I can get to from anywhere. All right, so we've got a user. We can create more users. What's more interesting is teams. So one of the things I can do with AWX, I said earlier, is I can start to delegate. So I might want to delegate access to inventory or credentials or projects. And so I don't want to do that necessarily all the time at an individual user level. So I want to group users. And teams is that mechanism we use to do grouping. So let's create a group of developers. You'll also notice there's this organization thing that keeps showing up. So we're just using the default organization, but you can do kind of multi-tenancy. I'm not going to say it's true multi-tenancy, but you can sort of divide things if you have different business units or whatever departments and you want to create some segregation. That's what you would use an organization for. All right, so we want to save this. And then we want to go ahead and add some users. So we want to add our B. Smith user. And he's just going to be a member of the team. He's not an admin. So anytime I add a user to something or a team to something, I can set the level of access they have, whether it's an admin, a user, or someone that can do updates, that sort of thing. All right, so we've got teams, we've got users. The next thing we need, let's do our keys. So we need to have our SSH keys. SSH, oh man, that was bad. All right, we're going to try the not type description. Just ending our default organization. All right, credential type. So this is a machine credential. And just to point out, there's all different kinds of credentials in here. So you see Amazon Web Services, Google Compute Engine, Insights, which is a Red Hat product, Machine, which is our SSH keys, Microsoft Azure, if you're going to use their cloud. What else is in here? OpenStack. I'm not sure what network means. CloudForm, Satellite 6, those are Red Hat products that we're now integrated with. Source control, so that would be like Git, SVN, Mercurial. There's a bunch of different SCMs that we work with, and you can actually, and there's Vault. So if you've got a Vault in your project, you can set up your passwords for that as well. So for our purposes, we have machine. There is, you'll notice down here this thing, credential types. And I haven't actually tried to use it yet. I need to, just because it'd be fun to demo. But you can actually create custom credential types. So if you've got, I don't know, some proprietary database thing or whatever, piece of networking gear or something that needs, I don't know, SSL certificates or TLS certificates or something, you can probably set that up with this. All right, so what we want to do is, if I can find my desktop, I'm just going to drag my private key over here and drop it in. That's kind of convenient. Okay. So I've set up my SSH key. That's all we need to do there. Let's save that, and while we're at it, let's create. We need a GitHub key. I'll explain why in a second. Defaults. And that also uses my SSH key, so we'll drop that on and we'll save it. And one last painful key that we need is my AWS key. We're going to actually have an inventory. So now that you're recording this, everybody in the known universe is going to have my Amazon keys.
You want applause?
That's okay. I'll change them. maybe a lie. I closed out my.
I think it's in your clipboard app, the note app.
I know that it's over here for sure. Alright, nobody look. Alright, so here's my access key, now the wall has it. My secret key. Alright, we'll save that. So now I have all my credentials. And you'll notice if you go back to any of these, if I bring any of these up, what are we looking at here? So this is, so if we go back and look at my GitHub credential, you'll notice now it says encrypted, where my private key was. So even if I share access to this with someone, like it won't actually expose the credential. They can't copy and paste it somewhere else and walk away with it. So nice to know. Projects is the next thing that we need. You're like, what is a project? Please tell me that you're all keeping your projects and roles in source code management. They're all in GitHub or something. Yes? Be surprised how many people don't. Playbooks are just on laptops or in a home directory somewhere. We don't know where they are. They all disappeared when Roger left. I don't know what happened. That happens. All right, so I've got a couple of things set up out on GitHub that we're going to use. We want AWS Instance Creators. And this is on Git, and we need the URL, which I should have here. Let's do this. That's me. So we just need the URL. You can put a branch or tag, commit, whatever you want in there if you want to do that. And we're going to tell it which credential to use when accessing GitHub. And when we do the update, we want to clean, which means if you've made any changes locally, they'll just get overwritten. And let's go ahead and do an update on launch. So anytime we launch a job, we want AWX to automatically pull the latest code down from GitHub. And if you click on any of these, lots of places around AWX have these little question mark things that you can click on, a little tooltip help, kind of handy. All right, so we've got our first project set up, and there's one more project we want to add, and then we'll get to some inventory. So this is my Hello World project. We've got to do Hello World. So it's also on Git. And I can just change this to Hello World. Type. And I want to use my GitHub credential. Okay, cool. The other thing that we want to do, which I sort of forgot to do while I'm talking, let's go ahead while we're here and assign permissions. So we want to make sure that our developers have access to this, and here I can set what level of access. Are they admins? Can they just use it? Can they do updates? So we're going to allow them to do an update. All it means is they can just pull the latest code off of GitHub. And we can control which branch they're pulling from, so we probably only want them to pull, say, from the master branch, because we might be doing development work, in some other branch. So you have that flexibility. And let's do the same thing for let's see, AWS Instance Create. So I'm going to do permissions, and I want to assign access to my developers. Again, we'll give them update. same thing with the keys while I'm thinking about it, because I think our job won't actually work if we don't have access to the keys. So we want to give our developers the ability to actually use the machine credentials. And again, all they're going to be able to do is use it. They can't change it. They can't delegate it to anybody else. Let's give them access to GitHub. Developers, save, and AWS. So the reason why I'm doing this is I want to actually log in as our user and kick the job off. Oops, not do that. Whenever you click on, like I clicked on developer, so now it wants to take me to the developer team and show me that, which is not what we want to do. All right, so now my development team has access to use all of the credentials. So they can run jobs that I will give them access to certain jobs, certain playbooks. They'll be able to access the project where the playbook is. They'll be able to access the credentials to use the playbook. All right, now what we need is some inventory. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually add 2 inventories. We need an AWS inventory. So we're going to save that. So if you have a cloud-based inventory, which means I want to pull that infrastructure, a picture of it from the cloud, I need to define a source. So in this case, our source is AWS, and we're going to tell it Amazon EC2. And if you have a custom inventory source, you have a custom inventory script, there's a way to do that. You can actually take that script and paste it in, and AWX will execute that script, and it will use the credentials that you tell it to use. So you're not limited to just the sources that we have defined. So for the credential for accessing AWS, we want to use the AWS credential. We want to filter the instances. I'm going to filter it by tag, and I hope I get this right. I think it's tag AWX dash that equals true. So what I'm saying is I only want it to bring back instances that have this AWX dev equals true tag. So if you're familiar with Amazon Inventory, you can put metadata tags on all of your stuff so you can group things. It's very handy for figuring out how did my bill get to be so big. But it's also handy for making sure that you don't accidentally clobber everybody else's stuff while you're doing a demo. So let's save that. All right, so what we now have is, let's go back. We have an AWS inventory, and we have, our inventory has an AWS source, and how do I keep on? Somewhere. Be able to run an inventory sync. I don't
Is
see
it the refresh button there, or the sync call button?
There's like a little. Oh, there it is. I expected to see it down here. I don't know why. Oh, this is okay. I'm being done. So yeah, we want to run that. All right. So that's going to cause it to go out to AWS and find instances that match that tag that we gave it. Hopefully, it doesn't find any yet. All right, so one more inventory to add. We'll let that run. We want to add a local host inventory. So what does that mean? That means I want to actually be able to run things just on the AWX host itself. So let's save that, and we're just going to manually add a host. host, and the host name is localhost. And we're going to give it a variable. The Ansible connection is YAML local. All right, save that. So now we have an inventory we can use just to run things on the AWX host itself. So one of the jobs we're going to run is to create an AWS instance. So we don't actually want to SSH anywhere. We just want to run the EC2 module right there on localhost, and this will let us do that. All right, so we've got two inventories now, and let's go ahead while I'm thinking about it, because I will forget. Let's make sure our developers have access. So we want to add our developers. And we're going to give them the ability to update the inventory, so they can run an inventory sync if they need to. The other thing I want to do, I think I forgot to do on AWS, is in our source, somewhere, I want to make sure that whenever I do a refresh that it overwrites, and it overwrites variables, so it picks up changes. All right, so here real quick. So localhost, let's also make sure our developers can access that. And they should be able to run an update, save it. All right, awesome. So we're almost there. The fun part, let's set up some jobs. We actually want to run a playbook. So we're going to set up two jobs, and then we're going to set up a workflow. So the first job we want to run is our AWS Instance Creators. So my thought process here was, imagine we have some developers, and every time we get a new developer or someone joins the team, what do we got to do? We've got to create an instance for them to work on. And typically that might not be an AWS instance, maybe they're just using a laptop and they've got Docker containers and they're happy, that's fine. In our pretend environment, they actually need an AWS instance. So that's what this is going to do. We're going to delegate the ability to our development team to actually run this job. So they'll have access to the playbook to execute it, access to the credential, they'll have access to the localhost inventory. And once their instance is created, they'll have access to the AWS inventory and the SSH key to get out there. So they'll have everything they need, but we've kind of sandboxed them, right? We're only going to let them do so much. And they can't get access to our credential and go off and do crazy stuff. They can only access the inventory that we've said we're okay with them accessing. They can only run the playbooks that we give them access to. So if you think about it, if you're an admin and you're not using AWX, you can now use it for free. And you can start to change your daily work schedule. And you can start to just, on your own, start delegating work out. And let people kind of run some of their own stuff without worrying about the wheels coming off the cart, if you will.
Does this still have an API endpoint on Tower?
Man, don't jump ahead. Yes, it does, and we'll take a quick look at that. It does. How it's organized, the front end that I'm using is all JavaScript, right? It's a single page application, and Django is serving up an API. So if you're familiar with the Tower API, that full API is available here, and we'll take a look at how we can put that to use. All right, so to run our job, we need an inventory. This job is going to use the local host. We need a project. It's going to use the instance create project. And this, I always think this is kind of cool. What it did was it looked in the project and it said, well, what things look like playbooks? What files? And so it gives me a list of choices. We're going to run the provision.yaml playbook. And then we need credentials. So we're going to need a machine credential, because once this thing creates the instance, it's going to actually dynamically add that to its local inventory, jump on that box, and install Docker for us. So we need my machine credential, and we need the AWS credential. And you'll notice, so I'm giving this job associating all the credentials with it that it's going to need. And what's going to happen is in the back end, when it actually runs the playbook, AWX will decrypt things and make sure that proper environment variables are set or whatever is needed to make sure that the playbook can actually run and access the things that it needs to access. You'll also notice like a lot of the Ansible playbook sort of command line parameters are here, so forks, limit, tags, instance group, verbosity. So this is actually about running a playbook, so I can set all of those things in my job template. So right now I'm creating a template, and that template I can use to actually run or schedule a job. What else do we need? We don't need any of these options. If you want to, you can pass extra variables. You can turn on fact caching, but we don't need that stuff for our purposes, so let's save it. Let's give our development team access to it. And they're just going to have execute permissions, so all they can do is they can view and execute it, but they can't make any changes to it. And the other thing we want to do is set up a survey. So if we look at that playbook actually takes two parameters. I won't pull it up right now, but just suffice it to say that it's looking for two variables, and one of those is an instance type. So I don't think we have to provide a description. The answer goes in a variable called instance_type, and this is going to be a multiple choice where you select a single value. Our choices are T2 small, T2 medium, and let's say T2 large. So on AWS, those are some of the instance sizes of instances you can create. Our default is T2 medium. So what I'm doing is I'm sort of setting up
2 eyes and
oh, you're right, yep, sorry about that. Please enter an answer from the yep, excellent. And you'll notice that the required box is set, and the other thing we need is an instance tag. And that's just going to be a text field, and we don't need a default for that. So when my developer runs the job, they're going to get prompted for two things: pick an instance type and give me an instance tag, right? And I've also, so now I've made it so like they can't go out there and create, a bunch of M3 extra larges and run my build. Too bad. I've narrowed it down to they can create some T2 style instances. All right, save that. I think we're good there. We've got one more template we want to set up. Let's see. All right, so, oops. Create a job template, there we go. All right, so we need a job template for hello world. So run, and you'll notice under run type, you can do a check. So if you just, like when you do Ansible playbook, you just -- check, and it just sort of checks the syntax of your playbook and maybe does some other things, but it doesn't actually execute the playbook. I think it gives you an idea if it thinks it's going to actually make changes. So you can run a playbook, a job in that same mode if you want to. So for this, our inventory, we're going to use our AWS inventory. Our project is the Hello World project. And again, we're going to choose a playbook. We need a credential, so in this case, we need our SSH credential. I think that's everything that we need. All right, so let's give our developer some permissions. Developers, and they can execute it. And we'll do a survey on this one as well real quick. We just need an instance tag. And it's just a text field. There we go. All right. So now we have two jobs. We have two playbooks set up that our developers can run, but we don't want to run them one at a time. We really would like to chain those together. So what we want is a workflow template. And this got added, I think this was added in like 3.1. I think it's really cool. This came after my UI development days, so I didn't have a hand in this one, but it's still pretty cool. So this is going to be our deployment workflow, and it's our default organization. I think that's all we need. And while we're thinking about it, let's give our developers access to it. They can execute it. All right. So we're going to need to add a survey. Unfortunately, the surveys that we, for the child jobs that we're going to associate with this, the surveys don't bubble up. You have to create them again. So luckily, we just need 2 variables. We need our instance type. Answer variable name is instance type. And it is our multiple choice. Large, and the default is to medium.
You're a Q in there.
Stop at you. Up here. Good catch. That would have been bad. All right, and then we need our instance camera down. Instance tag. And that's just a text field. Not too painful. We'll add that. Save it.
So you added the survey prompt to the individual jobs before.
I did. Yep.
Now you're defining the workflow template, so you have to redefine it again?
I think so.
Okay.
My experience has been when I don't do that, and then I go log in as a developer, like they can't see it for some reason. So I do it at both levels.
Okay. I hope that's a...
Now that may be wrong. I may be doing something wrong, but that's just been my experience. And I'll talk about, remind me at the end, after all of this pain that I'm putting you through, we'll talk a little bit about the project and where you can go to get questions like that answered. If I don't have all the answers, I probably don't.
I'm just hoping that that's a feature that's gonna come later on.
So it may be one, it may be that I don't know what I'm talking about, which is entirely possible. All right, so workflow editor, this is the fun part. So we got to tell this thing, why did that not open? Go back here. Oh. Yeah, we're on workflow editor. Okay, here we go. All right, so what we want to do is add in our jobs, right? So we want to run instance create first.
Fancy.
And then we want to update our inventory. So you'll notice up here I can select jobs, project syncs, and inventory syncs. So our first job is going to create an AWS instance. So we want to go ahead and sync the inventory. And you'll notice that I can do things on success, on failure, or always. So we can actually, if a job crashes, we can say, okay, do this other thing, which might be run something that sends out notifications or whatever. So we can get fairly sophisticated with this if we want to. My little example here is not super sophisticated. All right, so we want to sync our inventory, and then we want to deploy hello world. Yay. All right, so that is our workflow. So we're going to run a playbook, sync the inventory, and run another playbook. So let's save that. And I think that's everything. Hopefully I set it up correctly and our developer can actually run this and see it work. So, let's try it out. So you notice this little power button up here? That's how you log in and log out. So we'll click that. And we're going to log in as B. Smith, I think we called him. So I can type his password correctly. All right, so now I'm logged in as a developer, and this is the dashboard that they see. And I want to go to job templates, and here are the job templates that I have access to. And what I really want to run is this workflow template. So we're going to click the little rocket, and we should see the survey come up. Yay. So here's our list of choices. Teaching medium is pre-selected, and we want to give it an instance tag. We're going to call this bsmith01. Click the launch button. And so now it takes us back sort of to that workflow view. And we can kind of enlarge that a little bit, it's driving around. And we should see it start to run our instance create job. This could be good or bad, I don't know. So we can click on details and actually see the playbook run, which is kind of cool. And so this is like, and you also see down here, here's how the variables from our survey are getting passed in as extra bars. And after this runs, we'll let this run a little bit. But what I think is really cool about this, and another reason why you really should consider starting to use open source AWX, even though you're getting Tower for free, that's okay, because what this does for you, now you're capturing all this playbook output. Like how many times, I can't even count the number of times, like maintaining the Galaxy infrastructure. I mean, we do stuff in Jenkins, sure, but then like, you know, something breaks or we need to make an adjustment. What do? You go out to the command line and you run a playbook. Where'd all that output go? It's gone. There's like no record of what happened. There's no audit trail of who ran what and when things hit the fan, like how did we get here? And now like we can see, like, oh, yeah, we ran this thing out of order, or you know, Bill ran the thing, and we've got the exact error. We know what's going on. So like, to me, that just having that ability on top of being able to like, look at all the things that I've now given a developer the ability to do. Right? They don't have to really know what a playbook is. But now all of a sudden they're seeing this, they kind of get it. Oh, that's what you got. I get it. This is a playbook. I see the task running. I see the output from it. If it errors, I know what happened. Now we can start to communicate about like how we do things around our infrastructure and how we automate things. And I think it's a really powerful way to start to change that dynamic. All right, so our playbook is going. So what's happened is it's created an instance. So you can see the IP address of it here. I've used, I think the module is add host. So we've added a host to our inventory dynamically, and now we've SSH'd out to that host, and we're installing some software. So we're installing Docker on there. So that's going to run. While that's running, one of the questions that always comes up is, well, how do I get information, artifacts from the first playbook into the next playbook? And there's actually a cool mechanism for doing that. Anyone know what it is? Just out of curiosity. Come on, someone must know. So if we go out to so AWS Instance Create. This is the project associated with the first job that we're running, and we're running the provision.yaml playbook. And so you'll notice in here this little thing called set stats, if you can see that. So set stats is your vehicle for setting some variables and having those get carried through to the next playbook. And so what I've done is, at the top of this, I've said, hey, give this a default value of 0. And then if you actually create an instance and you do some stuff, then down here at the bottom, I say, tell me how many instances you created, and I just assign it to an account. So it's not real sophisticated, but the point is we should see an instance created value of 1 because we created one host, and we should see that show up in the next job. And so that's your mechanism for kind of carrying along some artifacts that way.
When was this module introduced? Is it 2.4 or 2.3?
I think I saw the documentation of said 2.2.
Wow, okay.
All right, so this is still humming along. While it's doing its thing, someone asked earlier about the API, so I'm just going to talk about that a little bit. So like I said before, the web page, this web UI that we've been working in, it's a single page application. It's written in AngularJS. If that means anything to anybody, if you're in the JavaScript world, it does. If not, you're like, what are you talking about? If I go to that same IP address, so this is the public IP address for my AWX instance, and I go API, instead of getting the web UI, I get the REST API. And so this is being served up by by Django. And what's really cool about this is it's, let me make it a little bit larger so you can see. You can just click through it. So we want to use API v2, the latest and greatest. Here's all the endpoints. And let's say that I want to get information about the projects we set up. And since I'm authenticated already, like I can just walk through this. And here's all the data. And another cool thing that I can do, if you click on this question mark, it's fully documented. It tells you exactly like how to use this thing. Gives you some definitions for the data that's coming out of the endpoint. Clues on how to sort, how to paginate, how to do searches, filtering. So there's a lot of information here, so you can access this API directly. So this is another cool thing, a way to kind of set up, if you will, webhooks. So if you're doing things with, I mean, maybe you'll do it from Jenkins, maybe you do it from your help desk tool. Somebody creates a ticket, and it does, you know, it makes a REST call to Tower and kicks off a job. You probably don't really want to do that, but you could. And another cool thing, because you're like, that's awesome, but how do I authenticate? How does this work? Not to fear. There is, if you go out to on GitHub on the Ansible namespace, has anyone heard of the Tower CLI? Anyone use the Tower CLI? All right, cool. So you know what this is all about. So the Tower CLI has been open source forever. It's just you couldn't get Tower, so it wasn't really very useful unless you were a paying Tower customer. Well, it turns out Tower CLI works perfectly well with AWX. What is Tower CLI? It's just a command line tool that lets you actually access the API. So what you can do, there's docs out here, and I have a little doc site might be not happy. There is a read the docs site there, and I'll just show you like a little example. In my Hello World app, in Travis, I have this set up. So what you'll notice, so this is my travis.yaml file. If you're not familiar with Travis, it's a public open source CI tool. So if you have a public GitHub repo, you can connect it to Travis and have it run tests every time you check in code, which is pretty cool. And then all of your contributors can see what's going on, and if they submit a pull request, it will run tests on their PR. Awesome stuff. Well, one of the things I might want to do is, let's say that my tests run through and they're successful. I might want to kick off a job in Tower. Maybe I want to move that code into testing or something. So what I'm doing is, I'm trying to find the command, I'm running pip install Ansible Tower CLI. So it's a Python package that you can install, and then it handles like all of the, like how do I log in and authenticate and do things with credentials. What it does is it sets up a config file, and how you can put entries in that configuration file is with Tower CLI config, and here I'm setting the host. And you'll notice what I've done in Travis, you can set up environment variables. So these could be secure variables that only get populated on merge commits, so commits that happen outside of a pull request, so sort of safe executions, if you will. So if you have an outside contributor that submits a pull request, they're not going to get access to these variables. But so for me, I get access to it. So I want to set the tower host, set the tower user, set the tower password, and now the tower CLI knows how to connect to my instance of tower. Yay! Since I don't have an SSL certificate, I'm turning verify SSL to false, and then I kick off a job. So you see the job launch command. How cool is that? And so anywhere that you can run some command line things, Tower CLI might be a really simple answer to sort of start to integrate Tower AWX into other parts of your workflow, if you will. And if that doesn't fit, then you can use the REST API and just call it directly. And there is all kinds of documentation on how to do that. The other thing I like to point out is you can take a look at the Tower CLI code, and that is like a huge source of like how do I access the API. It's all right there. You just like Python's not super hard. You can follow along with it and see great examples of how to do this stuff. All right, so back to our job. Let's just see if it worked. All right, so the first part was successful, and you see where it set stats, so hopefully that worked. I haven't actually tested that. So if we go back, should bring us, all right, the jobs. I'm going to go back to the workflow, see what happens, and it all worked. Yay! So what happened is it's all green, that's good. So it ran the first part, created the AWS instance, updated our AWS inventory, and hopefully deployed hello world. And we can go take a look at that job output. And what I'm interested to see is, where did I put that? Didn't work. It says it created 0 instances, not what I hoped for. And it may be that, well, it doesn't matter. Good news is the job worked. And we can do real quick. Hop out there, and it's on port 4000 and see. Hello world, maybe not. Okay. Actually, yeah. All right, mostly a success. All right, with that, I'm going to stop talking. Who has questions? Yeah.
Is there like an LTS or something? So, or is it just you're always just grabbing a nightly build of it?
There are stable releases if you look out on Docker Hub. So there's definitely how frequent they are, if it's nightly or if it's even more frequently than that. So there are frequent builds that are happening off of the development branch, and then there are stable release builds out there. That's the best I can tell you. When you say long-term support, that sounds a little bit loaded. If you want long-term support, buy Tower.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, Fedora's always been pretty worthless because it's like unless you're really involved in the Fedora project,
Right.
Once it's a year away, you don't even know what the upgrade commands are because they've changed twice.
Yep.
So.
And so AWX is gonna work in a similar fashion. Like I said before, it is gonna move fast. There's not going to necessarily always be a perfect upgrade path from this release to that release, and that's where the value add happens on the Tower side, right? So I'm gonna do something to make some money. Who else has a question? Yeah.
Something like Okta with AWX, like single sign-on. I guess I don't know that when we do like.
I know. I don't know the answer to that, and I would refer you to the Tower documentation. So if it's available in Tower, it'll be available in AWX. I know for certain LDAP is there. I don't know what other sort of authentication mechanisms are supported off the top of my head, but there's a question in the back.
The credential store vault,
Yes.
is that Ansible vault or
Yeah.
HashiCorp?
No, right now it's Ansible Vault. Come on, man. So like I said before, you can define custom credential types. So it's probably possible to connect to HashiCorp's Vault, to set that up and make it work for sure. And that's actually, that question comes up a lot. HashiCorp, I think I'm saying that right, HashiCorp's Vault product is very popular. So yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
What about hardware PPMs and like entering the pins and stuff like that? Is that
Hardware, help me out, what is that?
it's like a hardware
Like a
private
key?
Yeah, it's a module.
RSA keys? You mean kind of like an
a
RSA key?
key type thing?
Yeah, exactly. So you would load it into the SSH agent.
I
And then
have no earthly idea. I just go outside of my realm of experience. I know that exists. I'm curious, how do you solve that with just Ansible? What do you do?
well, when you load it into your agent, then it prompts for pin.
Okay.
Pin and from
So if it works with Ansible, I'm pretty sure there's a way to make it work.
I just don't know how it's loading.
I don't know the answer to that. So I'll refer you to our doc site. The other thing I forgot to do, let me just do this real quick, back to my slides, because clearly I don't know the answer to everything. So this was the join us slide. So there's lots of ways to get involved or to get answers to your questions. The best would be the mailing list, the Google group, AWX Project. If you want more real-time, the Ansible AWX IRC channel is a great place to jump in and ask questions. There are multiple tower engineers in there during business hours all the time, and they may be able, if they aren't engaged in something else, may be able to answer questions. Other community members will be there too, so there are ways to get answers and find help, and always you can file an issue at the project. Certainly if you find a bug or want a feature request or something, please file an issue. If you're interested in coding and getting involved in development, there's a contributing guide, which I didn't touch on that, but there's a really good guide the team put together that will help you stand up a local development environment. So whether you want to do back-end Django stuff, maybe you want to write something cool that's specific to HashiCorp Vault, like that could be a thing, or you want to do some front-end work. All of that is well documented, and you can jump in and do that. There's some guidelines for how to submit a pull request there, so definitely consider getting involved. And I should mention the last item on there is a code of conduct. So we do want the community to be a positive sort of subset of the broader Ansible community. So we have the same code of conduct. It's pretty simple. Respect your neighbors, respect other people in the community, and we'll all get along great. And if you find that you run into somebody that's not, if it's being less than pleasant, please let us know, because we certainly want to address that. Filing issues. I think the big thing is prioritization. The tower engineering team is always going to prioritize things based on customers and what are the real emergencies. So if you file an issue asking about I don't know, whatever, how do I do this inventory thing or whatever, some custom script I have isn't working quite right, that may not be priority number one, so just be patient. Like I said before, there are some guidelines for submitting PRs. I don't think we need to, and code of conduct, so reach out to us at codeofconduct@ansible.com if you have any questions or feel like the community is not doing things you expect. All right, so that's all I have on that stuff. Hopefully that helps. What other questions can I answer?
How is Tower licensed?
You probably mean AWX. What's the?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you were to buy Tower, is it like per server or per node or something
Last I
like that?
knew, I believe it is. It's based on the size of your infrastructure. But AWX is free.
Right. So I mean that brings up a good question, which is I think a lot of people how they adopt Chef is that they install some kind of Chef Community Edition and then they kind of convert that into the pay for product, right? So because if they wanted to have additional support,
Yep.
I think that's what he was asking about, which is that can you right now set up AWX and then transition to Tower? He doesn't want to have to basically like, oh my god, I have to reinstall Tower and do all this configuration all again type of thing.
That's a really good question. I don't know the answer. I don't know the right answer. It seems like there should be a path, and it probably is. And that would be a great question to bounce off of the AWX IRC channel, just to see, like, hey, I'm thinking about really investing in AWX and loading up all my infrastructure and setting this stuff up. And once I convince my boss that we should be a Tower customer, how do I go from here to there? And is there going to be a supported path? I think that's a great question. It seems like there should be, there probably is, but I'm not close enough to it to know what the answer is. Who else has one last question? Yeah.
When we were pulling the inventory from AWS
Yep.
dynamically,
Yep.
if you ever wanted to commit that somewhere, is that possible? Because normally if you're using Ansible, right, it's in YAML. So
Yeah, so if you run the AWS Inventory script, you could run that locally and you get all the JSON output and you could save that if you wanted to or do something with it. So what's happening is it's being stored in the Postgres database. I don't know that there's necessarily a way to export that. You could probably pull it out of the API or do something with Tower CLI if you wanted to pull it out. I'm not sure what the use case is, but
I'm just thinking either all your stuff is in a repository somewhere, or I guess what this is introducing is that some is in the repository and some config is actually in the database. So it's that mix with how, right?
yeah, so I mean your inventory is still dynamic. All we're doing is we're pulling it down and caching, providing sort of a better caching mechanism than you have today with the Amazon inventory script. And we're introducing projects, so we're sort of forcing you to put your playbooks and roles and things in some SCM. How do you get it back out? The only way you're going to get it back out is with the API if you really want to do that. The point is, like, don't do that. You don't need to do that. All right, I think, do we want to do one more question, or are we calling it a night? Anybody got one last question?
I do have one.
All right.
More about Ansible in general.
All right, don't make it a hard one.
No, yeah, I mean, you guys are definitely moving towards projects as far as organizing in AWX.
Sure.
Is that a general best practice that you recommend, that we break
Yes.
up things into multiple repos?
Yes.
With focus?
Yeah, for sure. And that's going to make it easier to delegate, right? The more you kind of have things separated, because what you saw is if I give you access to a project, you get access to all the playbooks in that project. That can be good or bad, right? So you kind of want to think about grouping things based on subject areas and who might want to have access to what, who you might want to delegate to and not, and those kinds of things. All right, I am done talking.
Great. Just before people leave, I just want to mention the fact that I think there's a new event. There's an event that is like Ansible Fest. This year they decided not to do Ansible Fest in New York City, which is, my heart's broken, but apparently there is a semi-free version of it. I sent out the links a while back. In case you guys just joined the group, I'm going to try to circulate that sign up again, and hopefully I'll see you guys there.
Oh, semi-free.
Yeah, it is free.
It is free.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely free.
Ansible Automates?
Yeah, Ansible Automates, which is
It's like a one day
thing.
It's interesting because they do a lot of best practice stuff. They'll do some good use cases. So we'll have some customers come out and share their stories about how they're using products in different ways.
So thanks to Ken and Yodle and Web.com for
Yeah.
hosting.
Yeah,
Really
that's pretty
appreciate
awesome.
Yep.
it. And yeah, hope to see everybody at Ansible Automates and the next time we can find a speaker. So thank you.
Thank you.